Hello, it's been a long time since my last post. Please forgive me for that. I don't believe I've posted anything on YouTube for about a year. And as an author, it's probably frowned upon. I don't post because I have to. I really post just when it feels right to post. And in my defense, it's been a very busy year. I've been writing a book that's it's really been quite all-consuming. Um, and I'd like to introduce that book to you today. So the book title is The Genesis Code, Revealing the Ancient Path to Inner Freedom. And this book deals with a code that's embedded into Genesis 1 through 3, which is the first chapters of Genesis, first chapters of the Old Testament or Hebrew Bible. And this code reveals a principle, or we could say the principle, or the truth that if you know it would set you free, that Jesus alluded to his disciples, but that he also stressed he kept secret and only conveyed to his disciples or direct close students. I discovered this code and the principle in Genesis 1 through 3 that shows that Genesis is actually has layers of meaning, and the deepest layer of meaning is the principle. The layers above that are cultural and religious and all of that. And they're not that transformative, but that deepest principle layer is incredibly transformative. And the way that I realized this, for those of you who've read The Unbound Soul, which is my first book, or possibly Experience, my second book, you might be familiar with the story that I talked about when I was about 8 years old. As a child, I had this recurring dream of Jesus like lying on his back in the middle of the floor. I would wake up in the middle of the night, dream state that seemed realer than real, and the room was illuminated with this warm, glowing light. It felt very safe, and I would look over and see this man, clothed, thankfully, on the floor in my room. And normally this would be an experience that should terrify any child, but I felt just like drawn to this person. And so I got up and walked over, and that's when I realized, looking into his eyes, the incredible depth of love, but there was also a deep sorrow. And I knew by means that I don't understand, but kind of deep in my bones, or just like at a cellular level, at the time, it wasn't I thought, it was, this is Jesus Christ. Now, at the time I was going through, I was attending Bible study and all of that. And so that could have painted the dream. But in this dream, Jesus asked me for help. And so I reached down to grab him as a little child, thinking he needs help standing up. I grab onto his arm and try to pick him up, and his arm kind of distorts and melts in my hand, as almost like a water balloon would distort. And I realized in that instant that he doesn't have a skeleton. He has no bones. And so I looked down at his body, and I could see that it's sagging. So I look back into his eyes, and he pleads with me to help him. And in that moment, I get kicked out of the dream. That same dream repeated, moment for moment, exactly the same way, unfolding exactly the same, no changes each time I had it. And it happened, I would have that dream every couple of weeks, or maybe once a month, for about a year or so, maybe might be half a year, I don't know, but it occurred a number of times. And I would wake up from this dream in tears. It was rather haunting because I really wanted to help him, but I didn't know what he wanted. And so I would, go to school and do my daily activities. And this was just always in the back of my mind. It's quite disturbing, actually. Wondering what he wanted and how I could help him. And he seemed like, he was really desperate for help. And so I started praying that at that last moment when he would ask me for help, and actually in the dream he would ask me for help twice. The first time I'd try to pick him up, and then he'd ask me again, and I'd get kicked out. That I'd be allowed or be enabled to stay in the dream a little bit longer so that I could find out what he actually wanted. And at some point it happened. Now, each time that I entered this dream, I would not remember that I had experienced it before. So it was as if it was new each time. And only upon awakening from the dream would I realize, oh, this is exactly the same dream that I had, so many times before. And the fact that it could recur in this exact way each time, that in itself is baffling and mysterious. But one day or one night, as he asks for help the second time, the point where I always got kicked out of the dream, and a light filled my body, for lack of a better term. I was just, and it anchored me in the dream. And so I could ask him, how can I help you? And then he explained that his teachings had been distorted and much of it lost, and very little of what he actually conveyed can be found in the Bible now. And that this distortion happens because people are trying to spread and market a religion, and it's getting shared mouth to mouth, and just sort of distorts as it goes. It's like a game of telephone, and it just distorts. And his original teachings were to the Jewish people. Christianity got conveyed through people other than Jewish people. It ended up taking on a lot of different meanings that apparently were not what he was intending to convey. And so he said, find my bones. They are the essence of my teachings, and bring them back to the world. Will you do this? And I'm just an 8-year-old child. I didn't even know what he meant, but it just felt viscerally right. Like, this is what I'm supposed to do. And so I said, I will. And the dream was done. And I was just completely confused after that. I didn't even know where to begin. Now, if I were being honest, I did know that I was going to have to find it on my own, and I really couldn't rely on other people or books or whatever to reveal this exactly. I really did have to find it on my own, but kids, you'd like to be able to just ask your parents, or ask an elder, or somebody going to give it to you. Watch a TV show, a documentary that's just going to give you the answer, but that's not how it works. So I did spend some time trying to read the Bible. I went to church a few times, and it was quite frustrating because at least the church I went to, there's a lot of fear and hellfire and damnation, and a lot of you sinner kind of stuff going on, which I didn't find was at all helpful, and it felt viscerally wrong. Like, that's not what actually Jesus' message was. Why I didn't think that was Jesus' message, I couldn't say, but it just felt like exactly the opposite. And so as I developed, this dream was really haunting, and I got more and more lost and more and more frustrated with myself. And eventually I actually became, for a lot of reasons, I became suicidal when I was 16, a lot of abuse and that sort of thing. But the narrative in my mind wasn't really about the abuse. It was that I had no clue about anything. How on earth could Jesus ask me to bring out the truth of his teachings? I was a total loser. I didn't trust myself. I didn't think I had anything to offer. So, it led me into a suicidal state, which at the last minute, for another means I can understand, there was an intervention. So I'm sitting in my room, I'm looking out the window, and I've decided to kill myself, and I've prepared everything. I've written a letter explaining in a brief way. No one's really going to understand why you kill yourself unless they've been in a similar circumstance. The first thing I'd say is, if you or someone is in a suicidal state, you understand that the feeling that to you, suicide seems the most rational option. And so it's a mistake to assume that people are suicidal or just insane. It's a profound mistake. They've done the math, and as far as they're concerned, they have no hope. And so to live any longer is only to prolong the suffering. And so it's, in a sense, to their mind, it might be an act of mercy. Now, of course, if they're killing themselves because they're trying to avoid shame or something, that's a different thing. But in my case, it just felt utterly useless, a waste of breath, a waste of calories. Why consume if you can't give back, was sort of the logic that I was going through. Anyway, so just before I'm about to kill myself, I take a moment. I realize this is my last moments on this planet, last moments maybe of conscious awareness at all, last moments of me. And so I just took a few moments to just be, just feel, and just relax. And something very strange happened. It's like it become very silent. It was a wondrous feeling. There was sort of this feeling of descending or falling, but not in a bad way. One was like settling into my body. And then in that moment, I noticed the light coming through the windows. The afternoon rays of light coming through the windows, and I could see the dust particles in the air intersect with that light. And they were like little angels. It was so beautiful. It was astounding. And I wondered, why had I never noticed this incredible beauty before? And in that instant, a voice came through, for lack of a better term, my chest. I mean, like my chest was like a bell. I have to describe it as anything. If something was ringing it, and it was this voice that was coming through that redirected my life. It says, you could learn to read. You could stop drinking. You could stop. At the time, I was addicted to marijuana. You could stop smoking marijuana. You stop hanging out with these people that don't really care about you, that just need people to, to hang out with while they're doing their drugs or whatever. The people don't really care about you, and they have an aimless direction. Study something that you really want to do, direct yourself to what you want to do, graduate high school early, go to university, go to college early, all of that stuff, things that seemed impossible to me. How can someone go from not being able to read to graduating early to then going to college and studying what they want to study and all of that? But it just laid out a plan for me, which I followed through on. I graduated when I was 17. I basically stopped going to school, spent the next year studying. And then I was in California. They had a California high school proficiency examination. So I took the California high school proficiency examination and passed it, which you get your diploma and you can graduate as soon as you pass, and your parents, assuming your parents agree. So I did that, started going to college, a local junior college. But anyway, that's how it sort of began. But I didn't get any answers as to what this truth that sets you free is. What was Jesus's fundamental teachings? What is this thing that's going on? Until years later, I started to have, I've been having mystical experiences my entire life, but I started having mystical experiences that were specific to those teachings, to the question of how I could help him. And last year, the most pivotal vision occurred to me about 4:00 in the morning. And I was actually early in that. So I was up all night. I couldn't sleep, tossing and turning. And I suppose probably sometime in the early morning, I entered into this twilight state. And then a mystical experience. And I could see the Bible flipping backwards from the end to the beginning. And it stopped on the first page, Genesis 1, verse 1. And slowly started to flip forward. And as it's flipping, I could see highlighted in the mystical state or visionary state, certain texts, certain of the sentences. And I realized as it was flipping forward and finished at Genesis 3, at the end of Genesis 3, that this was a code. And that if you read this code, it will reveal a principle. And not just a principle, but the principle, the truth that sets you free, the truth that Jesus was alluding to in the New Testament. Specifically, he talks about it in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, but not John. Those are synoptic gospels. John is different. And so I woke up that morning, rushed into my office, got my Bibles, started flipping through it to see, is this actual? Is this code really there? And sure enough, it was. I was utterly shocked. And then my next step was then to see if I could find a translation that best brought it out. It seemed that any translation worked, that you could see this code in any translation. But I was looking for one that was a translation that was closest to the original Hebrew. The one that took on the perspective of the original Hebrew, and most English translations do not. And so because they do not, they distort a lot. There's a lot of cultural misunderstanding, and it also lacks a lot of nuance. But So I did eventually, one of my students actually directed my attention to James D. Tabor's The Book of Genesis. This is the entire book of Genesis. And it's the subtitles, A New Translation from the Transparent English Bible. It's if you're interested in Genesis or the Genesis Code, this is a tremendous translation, probably the most accurate that's out there to the original Hebrew, most faithful to the original Hebrew, carries its character and essence to a high degree. It's really beautiful. So when I got this book and I started reading it, this is exactly what it was. And it enabled me to really start writing, because I can base what I was writing off of what's in this book. Again, it doesn't matter so much which translation. You can see the code in all of the translations that I've seen, but it makes it much more crisp and precise, this translation. So I contacted Dr. Tabor and asked him if he would allow me to use the first 3 chapters of his book in my book. Just copy and paste and pop it in there so that I could then point out to the reader what the code is and the principle in the code according to the closest or most precise translation that I can find. And graciously, he said, sure, absolutely, it'd be wonderful. So it was great. Now he's not read the Genesis code. I don't even know if he's going to like it. That's not my job. My job is to be honest, to convey to you. Hopefully, at some point he will read it and I'll hear back from him. But at any rate, so that began the writing process. And what I can say is that this is the most challenging, most revealing book that I've written. And I'm saying that from an author's perspective. What that means is, when I'm writing, I'm not plotting out what I think the book is going to be. I'm following what it reveals. And so it's an exploration. And this book reveals with tremendous clarity what this principle is, how it works in your life, and then what it is, the way of thinking and behaving and whatnot, that actually blocks your awareness of the principle and confuses or causes suffering in your life. And it brings the details of the devil, so to speak, metaphorically speaking, the devil's in the details. It brings those details out, and it is in those precise details that our suffering lies. And these are the details that most spiritual books kind of gloss over, that they don't really get into the essence. And so the Genesis Code brings it out vibrantly and precisely. And the great thing about it is, as you read the book, it's like I'm leading you through, or this process, the book is leading you through the development of what Jesus described as the eyes to see, the ears to hear. To get that development, it requires that you set aside previously established beliefs and biases. So if you're going to read it and enjoying the code, honestly, it will require you set aside your Christian hat, or your Jewish hat, or your atheist hat, or your beliefs about sin and beliefs about God, and beliefs even about what is a human being, belief about even what the universe is, to see with fresh eyes. Now, as I wrote, I was, from my perspective, the Bible is a sacred book to billions of people. It's been read by more people than any other book by far. Billions of people have read the Bible, and billions of people consider it a sacred work. And so the last thing I want to do, and I don't want to be offensive to anybody, but the last thing I want to do is not give a fair shake to what the text actually says, and to the beliefs that other people may have. And so to give a fair shake, to not distort, to not turn the message into something I wanted to see, or may have wanted to see, I had 3 guidelines, or 3 basic rules that I needed to follow with any assertion that the book makes, which is, one is that it actually has to fit with the original Hebrew meaning. Dr. Tabor's book is very helpful, and that I need to research the Hebrew language to find the root meanings of each word, to make sure that I'm not just relying on him as a translator, that we're getting down to the root of the meaning and seeing maybe possibly even where he might have gone astray, or anybody else. So we're setting aside deference to see clearly. That's the first one. So the original Hebrew, being faithful to that. Second one was, of course, being faithful to the mystical experiences that I had that directed me to this text and what the principle means. And third, the findings of the most current science. And so this book is based on those three elements: the ancient Hebrew, the mystical experience, and modern science. And I don't mean distorted science. Like a lot of people take quantum theory and turn it into something that it's not necessarily, distort it to that kind of thing. I really don't want to do. So I try to be as precise as I can in those areas with all of the points of the book, and that led to a revelation that was actually far greater than I thought, than the original mystical experience revealed to me. I wasn't sure while writing this book that it was actually going to ultimately support the message that I thought it was going to support. But as it turns out, the further I researched, the more I realized that even more so did it support that message. And that's something that I hope you will appreciate. It can be hard to, if we have a bias or belief system going into it, this is going to potentially poke holes in those things. And so for that, I can't say I'm sorry for that, but I mean, presumably if you're reading a book like this, you're looking for something that's authentically helpful. And if you're just looking for something that's going to match something you already believe, why don't you just stick with what you already believe and save yourself some time? But if you want a fresh perspective and one that's highly transformative in your life, the Genesis Code might be for you. Now, this book will lay it out so that you gain two things. One is, of course, knowledge, but that knowledge comes later. The first half of the book is basically developing eyes to see what the second half of the book will reveal. If you haven't developed the eyes to see, which means you maintained your belief systems and weren't careful in your reading as you go, you get the second half of the book, it's not necessarily going to reveal much to you. Development of the perceptual capacity is essential. And that in itself is tremendously powerful. But once you see the code, and I do the best I can to help you do that, but once you see the code, the coolest thing about it is you can't unsee it. It becomes so obvious that you will facepalm yourself and go, if you've read Genesis before, you'll facepalm yourself and go, why the heck didn't I see this before? It's so obvious. And even more astoundingly, why has at least 2,000 years gone by? Our oldest extant copy of Genesis is about 2,000 years old. But why? How could it be that 2,000 years have passed and it seems nobody has noticed this? Nobody's found this code. I needed a mystical experience to point it out to me. I've read Genesis multiple times, didn't see it. So if you haven't seen it, don't blame yourself at all. I certainly didn't see it. I was just an idiot. And then mystical experience, slapped me around a few times and pointed my attention to what was actually there. When I saw it, it was just astonishing. And it will point out how, when you have that realization, you realize how blinding beliefs can be and how you can miss something that's staring you straight in the face the entire time. That's the human experience. The truth is staring us in the face the entire time, and we don't see it. And so the Genesis Code really highlights this principle, what I call the principle or the truth that sets you free, in a way it's not just going to give you knowledge, but it's going to help bring out a capacity, or the eyes to see, the ears to hear, the ability to perceive at subtler levels, which will help you for the rest of your life. And after reading it, assuming you have seen, and the early readers that I've tested, like 9 out of 10 people, it's a high percentage, see the principle and have that facepalm moment. A few people didn't see it initially. Most people will see it, assuming you're actually authentically drawn to the book and you do set aside the biases. If you're devout atheist, you're probably not going to see it. You got to set that aside. If you're a devout theist, religiously believer, you're probably not going to see it. Got to set that aside. You come into it innocently, you probably see it if you're sincere in your search. So this book is now published, ebook, paperback, and hardback. The audiobook's coming in a month or so. But you can find it on Amazon. It'll be out in other outlets in the coming months. You might check out the book, and you can find a link in the description below. And the most important thing, if you would, I'm colorblind. I just got this copy today. It just came in today. It's the first time I've seen the book physically, aside from proof copies, which don't look the same. I had a matte finish on the proof copies, but this is a glossy finish, and it looks significantly different. But I'm colorblind. I can't see, the full colors of this book. I'm wondering, how does it look to your eyes? I don't have a lot of people that I can immediately ask in the physical world around me, so I'm asking online. How does this look? What do you think of the cover? To me, it looks really beautiful. The cover designer, if anybody's an author out there and is looking for a great cover illustrator or designer, Nathaniel Dasco. It's bookcovermall.com. Real genius. I mean, he's produced, I believe, my last 3 covers. Unbound Soul, Unshakable Awareness, The Warrior's Meditation, as well as the Genesis, are 4 of my current 6 covers. So he's amazing. So you might, anyway, I'd love to hear your feedback on the cover. And also, if you're interested in getting the book, what about the book interests you? What is your current perspective on the Bible? And then if you read the book, I'd love your feedback. Any questions you might have, things that didn't seem to make sense to you, or revelations that occurred to you as you read, how the book and the principle affect and transform your life. Love to hear that. You're going to have, if each of us has our own, we're each like centers of the universe from our own perspective. And so you're going to have a different point of view than I would. And I'd just be honored to hear your point of view. So if you would share that in the comments below, you can always send me an email at contact@richardlhaight.com, but the comment section works well too. You might just use that. And of course, I'll do my best to, support your process and answer the questions that you may have in the comment section. And thank you so much for viewing and for participating to the degree that you want. And if you purchase the book, I hope you find it serves you well. Thank you.